Let's move on, because it is time for us to talk about a really interesting weekend in the Hurling Championship. Reports of the demise of the Tipperary hurlers have been greatly exaggerated. I'm delighted to say Denis Walsh of the Sunday Times is with us this morning to talk about this. An incredible performance from Tip, really, in that everything that we thought Tipperary could be was exactly what they were. And it's not that it came out of nowhere, but it certainly... You couldn't have guessed from the league campaign, really, that they were going to put in a performance of such guile, physicality and accuracy, Denis. It was sensational stuff from them, really.
Yeah, it was. And as you said, they were terrific, and it was hard to read the signs, Ger. I mean, even going back further than that, I think I saw a stat somewhere at the weekend that they've won just 3 of the last 12 league and championship games. You know, like they finished outside the top 3 last year in Munster. And you know, despite all the talk about defined margins last year, I mean, there was really a feeling that Tip were in recession. And then when they didn't go for the young lads that won the All-Ireland last year, on 21, I mean, they basically ignored that team. You know, Jake Morris came off the bench. People thought he might start, and so they kind of went for a whole lot of greatest hits from the last 10 years. You know, it was almost like a team of the decade selection. All the best players from the last number of years found their form again. You know, as you say, it was terrific. They were well worth their win, and you know, it could easily have been more, to be honest.
I think John O'Dwyer is kind of the perfect example of somebody who. So we know about his qualities as a hurler, but he looked lithe, and he looked like he was as fast as he's ever looked yesterday. And obviously, the new management setup has come in and identified the issues that the team and individuals have had over the last number of years, and has immediately rekindled the bond with them that they had when they were winning All Irelands together. Yeah,
I mean, the issue with, as you say, or as you implied, the issue with John O'Dwyer would have been his fitness and his work rate. And, you know, he had fallen out of favour with Michael Ryan on occasions over the last couple of years. It looked like he was going to be a bit of a wasted talent. I mean, everyone knows what an incredibly skillful player he is, but it just looked like he wasn't going to fulfil that promise. Playing him at centre forward yesterday was, I imagine, was a curveball that Cork weren't expecting, but he was terrific. And obviously Cork had a rookie number 6 starting his first game in that position in the championship, and you know, he was very nervous. You could see that he missed a few balls early on, and he just couldn't get his hands at all on John Dwyer. And I mean, his accuracy was incredible. I mean, his first wide actually was from a free after Jason Ford went off. He had 5 shots at the post before that, and 5 of them went over. So yeah, I mean, he's a terrific player, and to have him playing as well as that, you know, gives them. And I mean, they have other options at centre forward, but I mean, you know, the way he played yesterday, I can't imagine that they'll think twice about playing him there again the next day.
And Seamus Callanan also back looking fit and healthy again, and you know, not as devastating as he can be himself as an individual, but also just chipping in with I think it was a goal and 3 or a goal and 4. You know, it's not bad to have Callanan not be the main player in your forward line.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as you say, fit again. I mean, he's missed a lot of hurling over the last couple of years, especially during the winters, with injury, the back injury especially. And you know, to have him, as you said, have him come looking so sharp, looking so lively. I mean, 2 years ago when Cork beat Tip in Thurles, Damien Callanan really bottled him up, and he made no impression that day. But yesterday he was, you know, in fairness to the Cork full backline, this might sound crazy, but the Cork full backline actually did quite well because they were under savage pressure. There was no block on the ball coming in. The supply lines were open, left, right, and centre. The Cork full back, Owen Cadigan, did as well as you could possibly expect under the kind of shelling that they were experiencing. But yeah, like Seamus Callanan was really good in a forward line that was just humming. And I mean, look, it's you know, with Eamon O'Shea back on board, I think the best forward lines that they've produced in the last decade have been when Eamon O'Shea has been around. You know, he's an unbelievable coach of forward lines, and you could see that harmony and that fluency again yesterday.
There's no question, Denis, that Tipperary have underachieved over the last 2 summers. I'm interested in to what extent have they underachieved, because if you want to get carried away with yesterday's performance, or even just look at the names on paper, if you look at all those names and pretend for a moment that they're all going to reach their peak or as close to their peak for the duration of this summer, there's a stronger argument to be made that on paper Tipperary have the strongest team in the hurling championship.
Yeah, I mean, I would feel that Limerick are still incredibly. I think Limerick are favourites for the All-Ireland and have every right to be. I was just had a quick look at the odds last night, and Tip now are just fractionally behind Limerick in the betting. And yeah, I mean, you're right. Only it is easy to get carried away. I mean, Cork weren't good yesterday. I mean, Cork would have struggled to beat any of the top teams yesterday, the way they played. So I think let's wait and see. I mean, in this championship, the kind of data keeps coming. There's another game next Sunday. You'd imagine they'll beat Waterford and Thurles and then be in a very strong position. But I mean, like that half-back line on paper all the week looked extremely strong, and it played like that. I mean, Brendan Maher and Pádraig Maher are around since almost 10 years. I mean, Pádraig Maher played in 2009. Brendan Maher was playing back then as well. They were super yesterday. Like Rowan Maher is only a young guy. Like that half-back line on paper is apart from maybe the Dublin half-back line, the best half-back line in the championship in theory, and that's a huge platform for them.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about. Sorry, before that, is Eamon O'Shea back all the time? Because it kind of news sifted out that he was a consultant, and then is he at every training session? Do you know, or how?
I'm not sure if he's there the whole time, Joe, but he's definitely there a fair bit of the time, and like Christy O'Connor, I know, was talking to him recently, and the way he was talking, he was expecting a performance yesterday like that.
Right, because anybody, whoever has had the opportunity to listen to Eamon O'Shea talk about it, he just thinks about space and the game completely differently. So, there's
and his big thing is, and he's this lovely phrase of connecting, players connecting, and you can see that yesterday, the way they moved the ball, the way that they found their men, like they scored, 224 from play. That's extraordinary. They weren't completely efficient in their use of possession. But to score 228 in a game like that, and so much from play, it's a reflection of their firepower.
Anthony Nash made a brilliant save from a penalty that no one's ever going to talk about, because he ends up on the side who ultimately end up feeling a bit like they got hammered as well. So it could have been much worse. Let's talk a little bit about Cork, because certainly a lot of the talk had been Cork's league campaign was about making sure that they were ready for this championship, and that this was going to finally be the year that they fulfilled the potential of the last couple of years, where grand, you win a Munster and that's great, but actually it's the business end of the season that you need to be ready for, and they were never quite where they needed to be. It looked like they'd taken a significant step back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a bracing performance from Cork's point of view. Look, with Cork teams, Joe, you can, over the years, Cork teams would have been queried about their work rate, or we'd say, going back a few years, Cork, when teams were playing extra defenders and doing different things from a kind of strategy point of view, and Cork weren't really keeping up with that either. And you can question Cork's power at times. But one thing that you could, about with Cork teams that you would never really query, or the Cork people would never like to see queried, is their touch, their first touch, their handling, their hurling, their basic hurling. And yesterday, their touch was just off. It was really poor. To come to the first round of the championship with so many players missing their first touch was alarming to see it, especially from a Cork team who, as we know, have plenty of really good hurlers. They've shown it over the last 2 years. Like, they won 2 brilliant Munster championships, not just like they won 2 outstanding Munster championships, 2 of the most competitive ones you could imagine. But yes, they just were miles off it, and like so many of their top players just didn't perform at all. Guys who Cork have leaned on in to win those 2 titles. Guys like Darragh Fitzgibbon, a young player, still a young player, 22 years of age, only playing in a 3rd championship, but that was his quietest game for Cork by a mile yesterday. And Cork need him bursting from midfield. Other guys just didn't click either. I mean, Seamus Harnedy was a real leader for Cork, couldn't get going. I'd say Patrick Horton was the only one of the forwards who kind of held up his end. But apart from that, it was just all over the field. Cork were in trouble.
In terms of a recovery from Cork's perspective, the handy trip to Limerick, I think, next week is on the cards for them. So it's like, when you talk about the data coming thick and fast, that's actually do or die from a Cork perspective, really.
Yeah, I mean, like, they can still... yeah, I mean, in theory, 4 points could get you in, and they could be going to Ennis on the last day looking to win up there, which we no joke either. So yeah, I mean, you'd imagine. I mean, the record against Limerick isn't too bad if you go through it. The All-Ireland semi-final fell apart last year in extra time. Or they had Limerick cooked. with 8 minutes to go or whatever it was. But they were in a different place last August in terms of their form. Yeah, I mean, the Cork, you'd imagine that there'll be changes, but looking at the bench yesterday, it's hard to see what players could come in that would make a huge difference. I mean, Bill Cooper was a big loss. I mean, Bill Cooper, actually, probably people outside the panel probably wouldn't appreciate how important he is to the group. He's the real leader inside in that Cork dressing room. So he's a loss. Clearly, if they can get him back, that'll be a help. But they have problems in defence, Ger, and those problems have been knocking around for a couple of years. They haven't started, Tim O'Mahony is a young guy trying to make his way. Mark Ellis, who was Cork's number 6 last year, wasn't even on the panel yesterday. He was travelling for the winter, but he's home, and he's been home for a while. Not sure how he's fixed. Alan Callaghan is another important player that Cork are missing. He was injured again, just literally in the last week or two. But I'm not sure any of those guys will be there next Sunday. So, look, it's huge. It's a huge game for Cork, no question about it. But you can imagine the atmosphere next Sunday in Limerick. Sure, like their first home game as All-Ireland champions. Yeah. It'll probably be 40,000 at the match. 2-3/4 of them are 4/5 from Limerick. So that's going to be a hell of a game for Cork.
Yeah, losing your home game in the first match of the championship is a huge blow, and there was the same situation for Waterford yesterday, who Gerlach Nan basically has had some interesting things to say about them in the Irish Daily Star this morning. He says there was no plan at all from them, no aggression, no leadership on the field, and no direction from the sideline. It was a poor afternoon for Waterford up until the last 5 or 6 minutes or whatever it was, Dennis, yesterday.
Yeah, to be honest, I was in Parky Kiev. I know you saw bits of the Clare Waterford game on the RT player on the laptop, which is never that satisfactory. But from what I could see, Clare were out the gap really until the kind of the late push from Waterford seemed to come from nowhere. But yeah, and I was like, look, people in Waterford, there was for all the success that Derek McGrath brought to them over the last 3 or 4 years, and he got so much out of that group of players, and there was always that kind of caveat in Waterford. Why aren't we playing with 5 or 6 forwards? Why are we playing this defensive system? And I don't think there was nearly enough appreciation in Waterford for what McGrath brought to them. And when you look at the league final, and when you look at the game yesterday, I think the kind of approach that Waterford had with McGrath would have served them better in both of those games.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been enough credit given to him, I think, for where he brought this group of players. Now, the other point to bear in mind, starting the game yesterday, they were short 6 of the players that started the All-Ireland final 2 years ago for various reasons. And they just don't have that many other players to come in of the required standard. But look, it's a really hard road out for Waterford from here. They're playing Tipperary away and Cork away in the next 2 games, so they could be gone before the last game.
You were talking about the Dublin half-back line as one right up there with Tip in terms of the hurling championship. That game, I know you were at that game on the previous night, a 223 to 121 victory for Kilkenny. TJ Reid scores 212. There's the incident with the Meyler Fuerna where he stands and prevents a free from being taken. A wild opening to the championship, really. Yeah,
it was. Fair to Dublin. Dublin absolutely tore into Kilkenny and harassed them and hounded them, and forced turnovers, and there was gang tackling, the kind of thing that you expect from Kilkenny. And Kilkenny were on the back foot, and through most of the Cody era, Kilkenny have been the aggressors in every game they played, regardless of the players they had. Even when they had their stars of the teams, they were still the aggressors. That was the way they operated. And it wasn't until the second half when they turned up the dial and performed the way that we would expect from Kilkenny in that environment. But Dublin, to their credit, managed to put them on the back foot for certainly 45 minutes. The first goal was probably changed the whole mood. But it was still level with 11 minutes to go. Even though you sensed the game had ebbed away from Dublin, it was still level with 11 minutes to go. But they only scored 8 points in the second half, which, you know, isn't going to give you any chance against Kilkenny.
Dennis, talk to us about the positional switch. That seems to be something of a hugely important thing that Brian Cody came up with in the middle of the game. It's not anything vastly new, but it was Hugh Lawler to full back, who during the league really looked like an impressive number 3 for Kilkenny and somebody that we might see there for a long time to come. And Pádraig Walsh moved out to centre back. How much of an impact did that have on Kilkenny's purple patch to close the game?
Yeah, it's certainly a fact. I mean, they made a few changes, but Lawler, I mean, obviously Liam Rush had Paddy Deegan in real bother in the first half. So Lawler went back and did better on Rush. Now, Rush came out after that and finished the game. He didn't spend the whole second half inside that full forward, because Dublin had the biggest issue on that Dublin had in the second half was trying to win their own puck outs. They done quite well in the first half and winning primary possession, or actually winning the rucks, winning the ball when it broke. Second half, Kilkenny cleaned them out in the air, and part of the issue, or part of the problem there was, from their point of view, was Pádraig Walsh went to left half back, and they were pumping ball down on top of him, and he mopped it up. He certainly won 3 or 4 puck outs, which is a lot. Yeah, like Deegan was happier at wing back, but they made those changes and they worked. But the biggest thing was the increase in intensity. Their tackling, which is the fuel of all Kilkenny performances, was better in the second half. And Dublin's shooting, Dublin's attack forward line just wasn't able to cope with the increased pressure. I mean, in the first half they scored 113 and only had 2 wides, which was excellent. But in the second half, as I said, 8 points just wasn't going to cut it.
All right, it's going to be an interesting Leinster Championship as well. Dennis, great start. Thanks a million for joining us.
You're welcome.